Okay, we're going to run through some of the changes to XCOM Chimera and give you some hints and tips for how to be successful in this game. I will say it's not as hard as some of the other XCOM games playing on normal mode. You might want to bump the difficulty up if you are looking for a challenge. Now, the first new mechanic that's been added to the game is the breach mechanic. There isn't any walking around and moving from location to location that you would have seen in the other XCOM games. Now, I'm still on the fence whether or not that's better overall, but what is better is you always know what's going to happen going into a fight, and you do have an opportunity to get yourself positioned well in each circumstance. Now, this one gives me one option to breach in. There can be a range of options to breach. So, depending on the equipment you've got, sometimes you can breach through, explode through walls, go through vents, and so on. So, that depends on the equipment your characters have got. At this point here, we're leaving a vehicle, so it's classed as the breach for the start of the encounter. Now, it depends on what breach you're doing. You might get one or more modifiers for it. So all units here get +3 mobility for the first round after they've breached. Tells you that we've got 5 enemies and that we're probably likely to take some damage. Now, the first thing you can do is put your agents into the order that you wish. Now, that might seem like you don't need to bother about that at this point, but it does set them up for the timeline afterwards. And at this point, I'm going to want to use Cherub's Shield because of this likely damage. Okay, let's click Breach to go in. Now we enter a slow motion section where we can see a range of enemies. You might be wondering what surprised, aggressive, and alert actually means. So surprised means pretty much what you'd expect, that they're not ready for the attack. They're probably unlikely to be in cover. They're probably more likely to take more damage. So it's kind of closer to being akin to getting them off, flanking them, or them being critical. It just means you've got a bonus chance to hit. Enemies that are aggressive, it means that they're probably going to shoot you in this breach. It also means that they've got some Overwatch added, but they're the ones that are going to damage you. So at this point, I'm probably going to take a hit from this guy. Now, what I'm going to use is one of Cherub's abilities, which is Phalanx, just to put my shields up, which I'd recommend considering. If you've got them, you're going to know that you're going to take at least that damage. If it was a higher chance of, if it was 97 or a higher chance of being destroyed, then I might consider using some of the enemy, some of my teammates to attack it. However, we've got 2 targets here that we can pretty much guarantee to kill. These are the ones that you're going to go for. In XCOM, it's about reducing the enemy numbers so that you can then have more turns to attack the remaining ones. So we'll fire with the breaching fire, and we've killed it straight away. So this enemy here is going to have a lower chance of being hit because it's alert. So we're going to pick on this guy. And hopefully we can finish it off with this shot. And we've now dropped 2 enemies, and we've negated ones, because they'll nearly always shoot for that Phalanx if you put it on. And then we enter the normal XCOM style turn-based fights. Okay, so here we have the more traditional XCOM experience. If you've played an XCOM game before, most things will be familiar, and we can quickly run those down. So if you see an object with a half shield, that means you're provided half cover. So you're afforded cover by being in there, and it means that you're less likely to be hit. However, there are better cover, such as this one here. Ignore the fact the shield's red for this moment, that would provide full cover, which means that you're less likely to take damage, less likely to be hit. Now, the reason it's red is because this enemy here is in a flanking position. So pay attention to the colour of the shields, because they will alert you to where potential enemies will be able to hit you from. What we want to try and do most of the time in XCOM, and this is the similar strategy to the previous games, is to make sure there are less enemies on the field that can attack you before your turn ends. Now, it's mixed up massively in this one because we have a timeline. So what this shows me is I have 1 character to use before the Legionnaire and the Python get their go. Then we'll go to Verge and end the round. Then these 2 characters, followed by Blue Blood, will have another go, and then potentially if they're both alive, they will be there. That might not be the case. If there are more enemies left alive, they might be all in, let's say 1 more, they might be in a 3. They might be stuck in between different characters. So instead of a whole round taking it in turns, this one is turn-based in the sense that your individual characters get to go, and then the next character or the next enemy. So that is the core difference. In a circumstance like this, the best solution is to reduce the amount of enemies on the field so that there's only potentially one that can do damage. If I was to attack this one and not kill him, the turn would end, and then I would end up with 2 enemies that can then do their damage in a row. So you need to look closely at the timeline and make sure that you're dealing with the most important threat that's given. One of the final things that is important to do, just in terms of the normal play, is to make sure that you get your characters into flanking positions where possible. Think about the area around, think about what else is potentially dangerous, and make a calculated decision. If you can get yourself into a flanking position, it means that your damage, it has a greater chance of a critical. Now, I could shoot this character here. He's on very low health. If you use a melee attack, then that will guarantee 100% hit from that range. So I've now nullified that target. Unfortunately, we've still got the Legionnaire, so he's going to pick a target to shoot at and has done some damage. But fortunately, we don't have the Python to do that additional damage as well. Characters get normal attacks to fire weapons, and you get a percentage rating chance. This can lead to some frustrating moments in XCOM. The beginning of this game is not as bad as the previous games. In that sense, it does feel a lot easier because you'll tend to get reasonably sensible chances to attack. And I think a lot of that is to do with the smaller environments. So closing the distance or use any benefits that you can to improve that. You can see here my hit percentage is how it's calculated, and it helps you to learn that. My aim, the character's aim, the weapon range has added a bonus. However, my low cover hasn't really afforded me any particular bonus to that. So that's reduced that amount. These ones that come up in different colours are your specific abilities. I will do a guide for each character after this one's completed and as I move through the game a little bit more. And then we get abilities such as Overwatch. If you've played a previous XCOM game, then you're aware of what Overwatch is. Overwatch gives you, on this one, all the characters get a cone, and if anyone moves across that cone, then you can fire on them. That's really, really useful if you haven't got a useful character move at this point, or if you want to cover other characters. There's not so much advancing in this game, so Overwatch probably will have a different strategy overall. Preparation increases your defense and your dodge by 50. This one was usually classed as hunker down in the previous games, but it has a very, very similar effect. Once this enemy is destroyed, we'll then move on to the next location. This one has 3 encounters, and we'll stack up for the breach, and then we'll move into the next location, and we'll repeat the pattern until we've completed all of those objectives. Now, some sections are like this. I've got as much time as I like. Some sections will give you a timed objective. It might be that if you don't get something in a set amount of rounds, that it'll release reinforcements, or something will be destroyed, and so on. So you'll have to change your strategies according to that. But what is really important is in this one, you take the time to look at who's coming up next, what potential attacks they've got, and how to position them before the enemy attacks start to appear. Of course, we've done really well on the breach here, so it's made it super easy in this section. However, when you get to some of the more complicated encounters, you'll be balancing individual enemies and trying to weigh that up. Now, that's a quick rundown on this strategy. Hopefully it gives you a bit of help to get going with this one. As I said, the learning curve is a little bit less steep than the previous games, just based on the encounter strategy. What I will do is I'll put out guides for specific sections of the game. I'll also put out guides that help you to understand some of the characters' abilities and where best to use them.